Hello, I'm Randy Krosner, and I'm the Deputy Dean for Executive Programs at Chicago Booth. And I'm here in our London campus. It's our beautiful new campus. We've been in Europe for 25 years, and we have been in London for 15 years, and just recently moved to this spectacular location right next to St. Paul's. And I'm looking forward to welcoming people in when the travel restrictions and health conditions allow. We have our executive MBA program here for Europe, Middle East, Africa. We have conference facilities, executive education, and a whole variety of other activities. And in the future, holding conferences like this live in our campus. And what I'd really like to do is welcome to this spectacular event that the Chicago Booth's Kilts Center for Marketing and the Rustandy Center for Social Innovation are having today. As you know, at Booth, data is sort of the heart of everything we do. We have this powerhouse marketing faculty, and our MBA marketing curriculum are really rooted in data and analysis. They ask the students, the faculty, ask the big questions, and then look at the data, big data, small data, whatever data is necessary to get the answers to those questions. And our faculty have really been remarkable on being on the cutting edge of doing data analysis to address questions in marketing. And like today, broader questions, not just in traditional questions in marketing, but thinking about marketing for good. This fits in with a broader theme we have, and both in the London campus as well as throughout the school. I'm thinking about corporate social responsibility and ESG issues. For example, last September, we had a virtual global conference that started on our Hong Kong campus, came to our London campus, and then went to our Chicago campus on the 50th anniversary of Milton Friedman's famous essay on corporate social responsibility. And something that was particularly interesting about this is we had a very wide audience, but we had a lot of our alums on the audience. I did a poll in each of the regions. The poll came out very similar in each region. I asked whether people agreed or disagreed with Milton Friedman's approach, which is that the business of business is business, that the broader social purpose should be left to others. Business should be about maximizing the bottom line for the shareholders. And in each case, 10% said they were uncertain, but 90% of the people were had a view. But what was interesting is that only only about 30% agreed with Milton Friedman, 60% disagreed. So I think it shows the kind of variety of opinions that we have amongst our graduates, and if you go back and look at the conference, also amongst the faculty members. And so that's why this event fits so nicely, with that. We've been doing partnerships with the Financial Times for that conference. We've been supporting the FT's Responsible Business Education Report, and we've been doing a whole variety of diversity and inclusion events. And so I think it's really great that we have this series, and I'm great to be able to introduce J.P. Dubé, the Sigmund Edelstone Professor of Marketing and Director of the Kilts Center, to lead this discussion. In 2020, J.P. was appointed the academic trustee in the Marketing Sciences Institute. He was also named one of CDO Magazine's 2021 Global Leading Academic Data Leaders. Previously, JP was a research consultant for Yahoo Microeconomics Research, has been working on a research consultant with Amazon since 2018. And so what's really amazing about JP is he's really at the intersection of industrial organization and quantitative marketing. And you can see he's had a very practical bent in working with companies, but answering the fundamental questions that need to be answered in marketing sciences. And his research is really wide-ranging on empirical studies of the formation of consumer preferences for branded goods, price discrimination, advertising, a whole variety of things. So now I'll hand it over to JP to introduce our great panel of speakers. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Randy. Well, folks, good afternoon or good morning. One of the new developments with the pandemic era is that our curriculum and programming in real time has become international. I know we have a very diverse audience today. So yes, I'm Jean-Pierre Dubé. I'm the Sigmund Edelstone Professor of Marketing, and I'm also the Faculty Director of the Kilts Center for Marketing here at Chicago booth. First, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our third iteration of the Kilts Center's new Marketing for Good series. For those of you who've not attended one of our earlier events, we believe that marketing should be about more than corporate profitability. And this series was designed to explore how marketers and general managers can use their talents to develop sustainable marketing practices with a positive impact on society. And frankly, as more companies adapt their goals to include a social mission and social identity, marketers will be expected to lead socially aligned marketing campaigns and branding efforts to communicate what their companies stand for. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that today's event is very much a joint effort, and I'd like to personally thank the Rustandy Center for Social Sector Innovation. They're co-sponsoring. Now let's turn to what we're going to be covering today. Today, we will discuss how global brands tackle the growing public concerns about environmental sustainability. Our panelists will begin by defining sustainability at their respective companies and the process through which they cultivate a public image and a reputation for sustainability for internal stakeholders, this be like their employees, but also for their external stakeholders, that's their consumers. But this is more than just about a reputation. Let's turn to that Milton Friedman business should focus on business perspective. We will then discuss how sustainability aligns more broadly with the company's marketing mission, and to the point, how or whether it creates shareholder value as well. So to that end, what we really want to get into then is the manner in which sustainability does create new opportunities for long-term competitive advantage. And given our marketing focus today, and probably central to the entire initiative, is the extent to which consumers value sustainable products that are sourced through a sustainable supply chain. And most importantly, not just because I teach pricing, would those same consumers be willing to pay a price premium for sustainable products? Now, given that our two panelists are based out of Europe, we're also really excited to use this as an opportunity to discuss the international implications from sustainability and marketing. And with that said, let me now turn to our two panelists. As you can see, we are extremely fortunate to have such high-powered speakers today. I'm so incredibly grateful that both of them has agreed to help out today with our event. Let me start off with Virginie Helias. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Procter & Gamble. With more than 30 years in brand management and innovation, Virginie has broad experience across multiple categories, based on which she's developed skills in brand management, both globally and locally. But she's also personally worked on several of Procter & Gamble's multi-billion-dollar brands. These include Pantene, Ariel Tide, Pampers, and Virginie has extensive international experience. Incidentally, her career has shifted geographically on a base that spanned France, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and even the United States. And most importantly for today, as Chief Sustainability Officer, her mission consists of developing the company's strategies and goals on sustainability and operationalizing them across businesses and regions. Next, we have Rafael, or Rafa Oliveira, who is the International Zone President for the Kraft Heinz company, one of the world's largest food and beverage companies. One of his key goals is to get all of Kraft Heinz packaging recyclable, reusable, or compostable by 2025. At a broader level, he seeks to incorporate and promote the company's commitment to sustainability in every facet of the business. Prior to joining one of the world's leading consumer brand companies, Rafael, in fact, established leadership positions in finance, specifically at Goldman Sachs, where he was the head of Iberian fixed income and sales. And this actually turned out also to be one of Goldman's most profitable UK businesses during the 6 years that he served there. Incidentally, folks, Rafael is a Boothie, class of 2004. All right, and he started his post-Booth career in equity research. All right, so let's get started now. Just checking to make sure we have both of our panelists have their videos activated, which is wonderful. So we'll now start turning to our question and discussion section. What we're gonna do is start this discussion with a focus on brand reputation and differentiation. So why don't we kick off with the following? I'm gonna ask each of you to define what environmental sustainability means to P&G or Kraft Heinz, and why sustainability is important to your corporate brand as well as your product brands. So why don't we start off with Virginie?
Thank you, JP. Thank you for the introduction. So yes, what is environmental sustainability? I mean, I would say it's really about driving businesses and societies within planetary boundaries. But the most important, I guess, is how do you operationalize it in your company? And for us, it's what we've done through our Ambition 2030 roadmap. And the objective of this is to enable and inspire positive impacts through our supply chain, our brands, our employees, and our partnerships. So that's really what we mean with environmental sustainability. And why is it important? Well, I would say because it's expected, from all our stakeholders, and nature is one important stakeholder. I mean, if I start with our consumers, I mean, 9 out of 10 consumers are now saying that they prefer brands that have a social or environmental commitment, and all the way to investors who are now saying that sustainability is the new investment standard. So it has really evolved from being a nice to have, or some said a moral imperative, to being a business imperative. That's really what's important. So yeah, an important topic, and we're on it.
Terrific. Rafa?
Hi, JP. Great to be here. Great to be with Booth again. Look, for us, environmental sustainability, first and foremost, means do the right thing, right? And that's one of the values of the company, of Kraft Heinz, is we do the right thing. I mean, it means caring for the environment, right? Creating high quality products. They are responsibly manufactured, taste good. Remember, we are food company, so it needs to taste good and do good, right? I mean, as a large company, I mean, we believe we are dedicated to improving sustainability. We need to be improving the health of people, of the planet, and definitely the communities we live in. So I mean, why it matters? Because it matters to our employees, it matters to our customers, and it matters to our consumers. So if it matters to everybody, all of them, I mean, it matters to the company, right? And we really believe like our brands have a very big, enormous impact on people's day lives, right? And with that, I mean, and that size and scale comes the responsibility to our consumers, right? So that's why we believe in making this impact and again, helping shape the world, right? The way we are looking now at this environmental social government, right? The ESG term, we've identified a few areas that we want to impact, which is environmental stewardship, responsible sourcing, healthy living, and community support. So this is how we're guiding ourselves in terms of sustainability, and that what it means for us, and guides all the discussions and decisions.
That's terrific. Well, so with that said, I mean, it sounds like some of this is consumer and stakeholder driven. Some of this sounds to me like both of you are feeling that there is a corporate responsibility in this regard as well. Why don't we then ask the question, then, well, we're in the process of developing, producing, and promoting sustainable products, or sustainability more general, I should say. Where do you perceive to be the greatest gains? I guess we could start with Virginie again.
So, I mean, I'm not sure gains for whom, but what I can tell you is that the key driver for us is where can we have the biggest impact? On sustainability, you can work on a zillion of things. And interestingly, not all our stakeholders agree on what we should prioritize. So that's a very important topic, and that's why we regularly do survey to understand, internally, externally, where do our stakeholders believe that, what are the most important focus areas. But for us, the primary drivers is where can we make the biggest difference? And, when we touch 5 billion people around the world, even a small thing, seemingly small thing, multiplied by 5 billion can actually have a major impact. But we always start with science. And so the backbone of all our strategies is what we call life cycle analysis, which really looks at where do you have your greatest impact, across categories, and it can be different from one category to another. Is it in the supply chain, or is it all the way downstream when people use our product? Actually, for P&G, 70% of our products need water to be used. You know, whether you shave, you do your dishes, your laundry, you wash your hair, it's usually with heated water. And that's where the biggest impact is. So it's really important that we start with that. And then, you know, once we've developed sustainable innovation, sustainable product, indeed, there is a part of promoting sustainability, which means that very often we are asking consumers to do their bit, you know, because if we develop products that work better in cold water, well, they need to use cold water. Otherwise, it's kind of a moot point and we don't realize the impact. So it's like, you know, consumer participation being critical to turn our sustainable innovation into actually responsible consumption. So just to give an example of this, I mean, I mentioned cold water washing, which is one of our biggest impact area. Just to dimensionalize it for you, Tide cold water, you know, if everyone in the US were to use Tide in cold water to wash their laundry, I mean, that would save 4 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emission. And just to give you an idea, this is twice the amount of all the emission that we emit in our plants globally. So that is significant. But for this to be realized, people need to turn to cold when they do their laundry. So there is a part of, you know, innovating, there is a part of consumer participation. This is why both innovation, education, communication, and partnership, I think we'll talk about in a moment, but are all very important to make consumption responsible.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Rafa.
Look, JP, I agree. The fact is there's a lot of space in the sustainability, and you have to pick a few, call it battles, or a few areas where you can cause the biggest impact. For us, like ingredients and packaging are two areas that we really believe we can make a very significant impact in the world, right? So on packaging, I mean, improving recyclability, you know, reducing where possible plastic use. We call it reduce, recycle, reuse, right? So encouraging those policies and making commitments to do that, to reduce single-use packaging, encourage reuse through partnerships or with our customers of our other companies. So that's something that it's quite important for us, and we believe we can make a real impact. I'll give you an example. We started, like today, we have almost 300 million, 290 million of ketchup bottles that are fully recyclable. And that's to give you an idea, like if you put one next to the other, it goes across the earth 1.5 times. So it's a significant impact that not having to produce new bottles has. So definitely packaging is one area that we spend a lot of time on, and I can give you more examples of where I really believe it's an important area. The second one, as I said, ingredients. I mean, sustainable sourcing. It's another pillar critical for us. We call it like soil to table, right? I mean, as an example, our own tomatoes. I mean, we are the biggest producer and buyer of tomatoes in the world. And to have we have the goal of have 100% sustainable tomatoes by 2025. But tomatoes, one example. Beans, as I live in the UK, beans is a very important market here. It's another area. So we're spending a lot of time also with the farmers, encourage them on sustainable ingredients, how to produce better, how to have the most sustainable, and taking this all the way to the consumers, right? How we have alternatives of reducing salt and sugar. There are like in very important ingredients on our key categories that improve the health of the plant. So again, packaging ingredients are two areas that we're quite passionate about, and we spend a lot of time, and we think we can cause a big impact.
This is great. And one thing I'd like to just point out to everyone is how both of you have indicated the responsibility you as companies feel to, I'm going to quote Virginie, to one of your other stakeholders, which is the environment. And I think this is really important. But now I want to turn this back to Milton Friedman. And the business should be business focused that's been so hotly debated and contested in recent months, especially. But which stakeholders do you view as being influential? And I know we've already said the environment is a stakeholder, but besides the environment, which stakeholders do you feel are influential in shaping your sustainability priorities, and how? And I guess the question mark then is, coming back to Milton Friedman and this market-driven approach, which we hold very dear at the University of Chicago, who gets value from these initiatives and how do they get value?
Yes, and I think this is where we see, what's the role of a chief sustainability officer is to be able to take, the input from all stakeholders, because they all make relevant points. It's not like we can ignore, and we will not ignore, some stakeholder, but we need to understand, the one that indeed we need to take into account to create maximum values for all. And this is a very delicate exercise. So what we do to in the first place, get the insights, we do issue prioritization exercise, and where we survey a wide range of stakeholders, internal and external. And the most recent that we've done, for instance, tell us that the areas where we should focus on ingredients, climate change, sustainable packaging, but also enabling responsible consumption. Our stakeholders expect from a company like P&G, which is a brand powerhouse, to have a very critical role in enabling, inspiring people to embrace more sustainable lifestyles. And so this is why, if I had to prioritize, and we prioritize, saying, well, consumers is the the stakeholder that we are obviously going to look at in priority. And what we see now, which is very interesting, was not the case when I started in the job, but they are now demanding it. They expect brands to help them navigate this very complex environment, and they realize that there is a gap between their intention and what they are actually doing, a big gap, sometimes 20 or 30 points, because they are saying it's complicated. So brands make it easy for us, help us navigate that. But you guys like data, so I'll just give you a few data points on, the willingness now to seek out products that are better for the environment. Globally, it's 79%. This is huge. And it goes from China, 91%, to US, 70%, 83% in my country, France. But, so those are, really important. And now there is this hunger from consumers to reach out to brands for help on how really to embrace the more sustainable consumption. And then obviously retailers, which usually kind of mirrors consumer expectation. They are very important. Their voices are increasing in terms of sometimes playing the roles of regulators, deciding what needs to be on shelf or not, whether your packaging is sufficiently sustainable or not, So very, very important. And, living in Europe, regulators, have a very important voice with the EU Green Deal and many other regulation locally. So we are, in summary, we are listening to all our stakeholders. They all have very important perspectives. But now my role in particular is to weigh, and tease out the relative importance and make sure that whatever we create addresses consumer needs and delight consumers, because at the end of the day, we are a company of brands and we're here to serve our consumers.
Wonderful. Rafa?
Look, JP, who am I to criticize Milton Friedman, right? But I feel like I'll definitely weigh into, as Randy said, I think the 60% of the 90%, if I get it right, that have an opinion that it's more than the shareholders only, the responsibility of the company, right? And I definitely feel that way. Don't get me wrong, shareholders are important. It's important that companies make money. That's the way they sustain the investments, and they grow and fund all the initiatives that has to happen. So that's not to say that is not important, but definitely the other stakeholders are equally important. And I would start with the consumers as well. For us, it's, as I said, we have 6 values, and I'm quoting some of them. One of them is we are consumer obsessed, and it's definitely one that we believe strongly that we have to consumers and the new generation, especially the new generations, millennials, they have higher expectations of brands. They invest on, and they take the concerns that they have or responsibly protecting the environment, responsibly consuming. So consumers is a very important stakeholders, and that's what sustains our company, right? Or any big company in the long run. Employees, definitely a very important audience. I mean, in the end, employees are also consumers, right? So, but again, and they are very passionate about it, passionate about reducing food waste in our case, fighting climate change, right? Giving back to the community. So employees is very important stakeholders. And again, they are the ones that make it happen. You know, all of our best initiatives actually raised from the ground up, like employees caring about their communities, raising to the company, and then we're using our scale to make things happen. But employees definitely important. And then I would call it like our retail partners, right? And this is changing a bit. 10 years ago, you wouldn't, or maybe a bit more, you wouldn't talk so much about e-commerce partners. Today, they are e-commerce, but also retail partners. And these partnerships are very important. They have the pressure and they want to do the right thing themselves, you know, on their own supply chain. And we understand the pressure, and we want to work together with them in finding solutions. So I mean, I really believe in the end, all those stakeholders have an equal importance in the ecosystem, and they all need to be treated as so.
Perfect. Well, so you've both mentioned that there's more to a business than just shareholders. You've had a very heavy emphasis on consumer, which I'm going to turn to in a moment. Rafa, you also meant the employees, and I have certainly noticed that many of our own booth grads recently have started asking companies about what they stand for when it comes to sustainability. It's interesting. I heard several recruiters 2 years ago say it feels like your booth grads are starting to interview the companies now as we're interviewing them, and they want to know what their company will stand for. And this really turns me to this question. Let's just go straight to the bottom line then. This really does speak to the Milton Friedman perspective as well, and that is, does this affect your pricing? And what I mean by that is, there's clearly going to be some trade-offs between margins and your ability to make an impact, but let's put it in the consumer's lap now. Are consumers genuinely willing to pay a price premium to get a brand that, all else equal, simply represents these environmental needs that consumers claim to value? Will they pay a price premium for it?
So only a minority of people would pay a price premium for it, which is kind of the disconnect. You know, I was mentioning 79% are seeking environmental friendly products, but only 15 to 20% would pay a price premium for it. So they expect this to be part of what the brands needs to deliver. And we agree with that, by the way. I mean, we price for performance. We don't price for sustainability. And so what they're expecting is both the performance and the good for the planet, you know, in the equation. And that's our philosophy for developing products that offer no trade-offs. So this is why innovation is absolutely critical. Otherwise, you can't make it. But I need to mention also the reality of very often, you know, the sustainable technology would be at a premium until they reach, you know, the economies of scale. And you know, we've seen that on the renewable electricity. We've seen the price of solar panel plummeting, you know, once they had reached scale. And that's the same, not just for sustainability, that's the natural S-curve, you know, of technologies. And so there is a moment where the brands need to integrate that in their margin equation. They need to bundle, you know, sustainability with superior performance so that they can actually price for performance. And, you know, I mentioned Tide cold water, IL cold water in Europe. That's exactly what we do. I mean, we have an ongoing innovation strategy, which is to deliver better performance in cold water. We can price for that because it's a highly valued consumer need. They want, you know, the best possible clean. And as we do that, we enable them to wash in cold, which for detergents, it's about 60% of the carbon footprint. So, you know, there is a perfect intersection between, you know, the performance and what's good for the planet. We price for performance And with it, we give people the ability to have a positive impact on the planet. By the way, this case study is still the best one we have. This is the one that got me into the business of sustainability 15 years ago, because this is what we are trying to do, to find this intersection between, you know, what's best for the consumer, the company, the planet, and often is that in driving superior performance, you can actually reduce the impact. And we have many examples on our brand, and that's what I'm pushing our brand builders to find, this intersection.
Yeah, I agree. What I would say here in this case is, I mean, simply it's a mix. The reality is hard to define, saying it's going to be paid by one side or the other. I mean, if companies really want to make a difference and you want to nudge the consumer to change behavior, you cannot really assume they will pay more. You know, I mean, then and that's what innovation, renovations come in play, right? The companies need to be creative to find solutions, recognizing that some of the practice that were raised through many years, decades, sometimes they are not the most cost effective, right? So again, you have to continue using economies of scale, discussion with governments, commercial incentives, but finding, innovating and renovating the whole practice. And when I say innovation, sometimes people think just launching a new product, but there is the innovation on the supply chain, and as I said, on the ingredient side, how you work with more sustainably with farmers, for example, in our case, that make them more efficient. Consequently, you can pass this on to consumers. So, I mean, in the end, is a mix. I mean, just assuming that because of a package is more expensive or a product is more expensive to make, you're going to charge more. If you take this blank assumption, is a mistake. Now, it will vary. Sometimes it varies. Consumers will be willing to pay more, and you want to deliver a different type of service. But again, this doesn't exclude of doing the right thing, and it's good for the planet in the long run. So taking a longer term view, it's what's critical here.
Well, thank you both very much. And what I'm taking away from this is, and frankly, that while consumers want brands to be environmentally friendly, they want them to be sustainable, that there still is an inherent trade-off today at your companies between your ability to achieve these sustainable goals and the kind of margins you can expect from a product. So if it's not cost effective currently to supply a sustainable product, it sounds like the company will need to eat some of that margin, so to speak. I'd like to use that as an opportunity then to sort of pivot.
To be honest,
sorry,
JP,
Rafa.
no, just to say, like, sometimes I feel more than the margin in the short term is the investment up front that you're going to collect the returns on the long term. You see, because
great.
the margin you can vary, but you manage in the short term. It's more like, okay, sometimes you need to make a certain investment that is going to pay off in 2-3 years, but be willing to, or even more, but be willing to make that investment. That's a bigger, I find a bigger trade-off than sometimes if you're going to produce make a better margin next quarter or not. You see.
Wonderful. And that kind of already starts to answer the question I was about to ask. Then I can see that is, what are some of the challenges associated with incorporating sustainability priorities into your global marketing? And it sounds like the first answer you're giving is it's a long-term investment. We can't expect to see this impact margins, for example, in the short term. Are there some other factors, or you want to elaborate on this aspect of the long-term investment in terms of the challenges today of incorporating sustainability priorities into your global marketing?
So I would agree with that. I think there is overall a cost, investment element that sometimes requires a bit of a leap of faith, but each time we've done it, we've actually had more positive unintended consequence than not. I mean, I give the examples of the Head and Shoulders beach plastic bottle. This first bottle that we launched early 2017, the cost of it was 40 times, a regular bottle, because you have to collect the plastic on the beach, you have to process it, to sanitize it, to include it in the bottle. But in terms of ROI, I mean, it was beyond everything we would have expected, and now we're scaling this campaign. So I think the cost element is there, but now people understand that those things don't pay out immediately. they will eventually. And I think for me now, I'm seeing another challenge, which is more of a marketing specific one, which is the positioning elements. It's how do you integrate sustainability in a way that is credible and authentic for your brand, that is not borrowed interest. I mean, what we are seeing today, which in a sense is good, is a race to the top. It's like everybody understand that this is a place to be and they want to go, but sometimes it doesn't fit with the brand, so it doesn't come across as authentic. And this is why at P&G we've actually established a formal way to integrate sustainability into our brand building. And if you think about it, I mean, we invented brand management 100 years ago, and so now we are talking about reinventing it, making sustainability part of it. We call our framework Brand 2030, but as part of it, we are encouraging our brands to define their North Star, an environmental or social commitment that is long-term, fit with the brand equity, is measurable, and is brought to life over time with tangible acts. And this is not easy. This is not easy, but to me, that's really the key. It will inform innovation over time. It will inform communication. And just 3 weeks ago, we launched our first North Star, and it was on Iron Tide, which is to reinvent clean, to decarbonize laundry at every step. And this is an amazing, it's an internal rallying cry, but it is also a very strong commitment, which is now informing everything we do on the brand.
Thank you. Rafa, did you want to?
Yeah. What the only thing I would add here is in true like Booth spirit, right? Is using the right data is always is a challenge, because I mean, and that's how you can really make the right decisions along the way, and it's not always obvious. The data is not always straightforward, and so we try to do is working with subject matter experts and to make informed decisions that and communicating those decisions. I'll give you an example. When we start changing packaging, sometimes people just look at you're going to reduce plastic because plastic is bad. Other cardboard, for example, can be good. But then sometimes the cardboard in one specific case might consume a lot more CO2 than the plastic in that case. And using the right data to measure this, communicating and discussing. And again, in the end, taking the whole spectrum in consideration to make the right decision, that's usually a challenge. There are pressures that come from different groups everywhere. But again, to not lose the North Star, not lose the long term, that you're trying to do the right thing with the right data in hand. I mean, I find this is a big challenge for companies to manage, and for brands to keep their goals.
Wonderful. Thank you both. What I'm going to do now is, just being mindful of the time here, I'd like to turn to the audience. We have a bunch of questions that are coming in from our audience, and some of these were sent in advance. My first question I'd like to ask, this actually speaks to both of your respective roles in terms of your leadership and your leadership responsibilities for sustainability. This is a question from Rashida Alston, who's coming to us from the United States. And Rashida asks whether or not one of the most challenging issues that you've had to tackle, would ask what is one of the most challenging issues that you've had to tackle in your role? And more specifically ask, can you define courage in the context of decision-making when it comes to your work in sustainability?
Yeah, I can start with that because it was very clear what was the biggest challenge, when I started in this job, and it was really about changing the culture. So not a small feat, when I pitched the CEO for the job, I got 10 years ago, which was creating this position at the intersection of the science of sustainability and the business. It was really, the mission was really about embedding sustainability into everything we do, into our innovation, our brand building, and our culture. And that was not easy. It's not easy in a company that is very culturally codified, but that was really the task at hand. And each year, we survey our employees to understand to which extent this is integrated. And we just did the employee survey last month, And 79% of people say that now sustainability is a business strategy for their organization. And above 70% say that they are empowered themselves to contribute to sustainability in their organization. So it has really become everybody's job. It is a priority for all our businesses. So now we've shifted from should we do it to how do we do it? It's really the playbook that is needed, and how fast do we do it? And courage is a key component. I think courageous leadership is what it takes, because it is uncharted. There is no off-the-shelf technology. It's all about believing that's the right thing to do, believing in the mission, and empowering the organization to get there.
Yeah, I would say here, JP, the biggest challenge is probably managing the different stakeholders at all times, because there are conflicting moments. So how do you balance this act and not be responsive, short-term responsive, right? Because what will happen, and that comes not only the stakeholders we talk, there is also the press and activist groups, etc., that they will come in specific times to ask you for specific decisions that could be very short term. But and how do you manage the challenge of not necessarily trying to please all the stakeholders, but keeping the North Star and what you want to achieve, or what the biggest impact is, and staying course. And I think and it responds a bit of the second piece, the courage. Well, I think the courage is again believing that if you're doing the right thing, you have the right strategy. Keep the focus on the long term. Keep the focus that the long term will pay off, because that's always tough, right? You have the pressure of the short term, and as humans, when you're trying to debate, no matter if you're talking environmental sustainability or anything, I mean, short term versus long term, you tend to move to the short term, to the quick solution. But keeping yourself focused on the long term and what's going to deliver the better results for every stakeholder in the long term, it requires courage, right? It requires courage to go against what will be your instinct on the very short term, because the long term will be beneficial. I would say that's the biggest one.
Thank you so much. Well, this thread we're on right now has generated a lot of questions from the audience. I'm just going to summarize the common theme of these questions, which is just a lot of concern about the fact that, we've already mentioned that this can mean short-term hits to margin and margin expectations. And some of the concerns we're seeing, well, what if your competitors aren't doing this? And, how does this put you at an increasingly big disadvantage, at least from a financial perspective, and an ability to be stealthy in the product market? So I'm just going to try and summarize the question that comes from these concerns we're getting from the audience about relative profitability, competitive advantage, et cetera, to ask, what advice do you have for a company in maintaining an environmentally friendly supply chain? And to that end, what do you think big brands like yours can do to help spread this whole ESG concept from the production stage, even before reaching customers?
I mean, I would say it's not easy. If it was not easy, we will not be here to talk about it. So we need all the creativity, ingenuity, brand power collectively to find a solution. But the thing is that we all need to do it. So, this thing about competitive advantage, there may be a short-term advantage or short-term disadvantage, but in the end, we are all going to, net zero by 2050. And so, this is about how do you do it? And this is why, it requires business savviness and just great, as I said, creativity to find a solution. Someone said, if your sustainable solution is not financially viable, you haven't found the good solution. I mean, because sustainability at the end of the day is environmental viability, it's social viability, and it's financial viability. So we need to go for this intersection. And yes, short term, there might be a bit of an investment that doesn't pay out as fast as the other. But in the long run, I mean, this is where we need to go. And along with innovation, I'll come back to innovation, because this is the way to meet this challenge. We will get there.
Yeah, what I would say here, JP, is that the fact that we are large companies, right? we have a responsibility to try to drive this scale, because many times these investments that we are saying, they won't pay off if there's no scale involved. Let's give an example, recyclability, right? I mean, the recyclable industry needs to be profitable themselves to operate. But if you don't have enough scale to supply products to be recyclable, they will not be able to have a profitability and then sustain the industry itself. So consequently, the whole loop closes. And that's where big companies can play a bigger role, right? Because then big companies, like, we have the responsibility to use our brands, our voice, our reach, to make those investments, to help with education of consumers where needed, and then consequently, like, it pays off in the long run, right? Because then in the long run, the industry is created, more people come into it, and naturally prices of the cost of this price will drop and will become more sustainable. So again, but a small company unlikely will have the capacity to do that because of, like, financial constraints and all. So that's why big companies have a bigger role to play in this space.
So that was really nice for the both of you. This sort of oh yeah, you may go right ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah, because I would totally agree with that. And by the way, Rafa, when I started in the job, the first partnership that brought to me was one with you guys on bioresin. So it is absolutely true. We have so many now examples of solutions that are part of a partnership, like the Holy Grail, using digital watermark on packaging to improve sorting and recycling is one example, where now it's more than 100 companies, to get together. So scale and partnership are absolutely part of the solution.
So this is really helpful. I think, again, coming back to long-term as opposed to short-term, as you've both re-emphasized several times, that the long-term benefit to a big company from being a leader in sort of the thought, and especially a thought leader in this domain, is going to be the scale advantages you'll have in being able to supply these products. And as consumers more and more start demanding them, as employees start looking for this vision and identity, you'll be in a strong position to be able to deliver on that. So I think that's a really helpful thing to hear. I have a more, it's like sort of a tactical or logistical kind of question from the audience. Judith Allen points out that there's now a norm to provide sustainable data to the CDP to disclose your progress to shareholders. And Judith asked whether or not you see this data collection as a burden, or are you able to use these types of disclosures to enhance your sustainable operations further?
Do you want the honest answer or politically correct?
No, the honest answer.
It is a burden. I mean, It is an immense effort, throughout the company. But we also understand that we have to do it because we need to give data, for investors and other stakeholders to make an informed point of view. Now, my wish would be that we are able to consolidate, because this CDP is one of zillions, that we have to fill. I mean, it comes from customers, retailers, it comes from all parts of, and so, and many are working on standards, but we really need to be able to standardize this data and reporting, because, we don't want to get to a place where we spend more time reporting than doing the work.
Fully agree. I said that before, is one of the biggest challenges, right? Right collection of data and science. It is not easy. So yes, using the different providers, but also standardizing some of the metrics will be helpful. But yeah, it will take time. It is a challenge.
Great. So I'm gonna use this as an opportunity just to go into a little bit more into the weeds. We have a question from Shri Ramakumar, who's actually asking about technology and wondering how or if you're leveraging digital technology to help you achieve your sustainable goals.
Rafa, you want to start?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's critical, and it's a huge gain for the planet, right? For the globe. I mean, the fact that technology is advancing so much and so fast, it gives a huge opportunity for us again to have more visibility on what's happening, to again collect better data, to be more agile. So for sure. I mean, it's a critical piece, and that I wouldn't say it wasn't there 20 years ago, but is definitely gaining importance. So yeah, digitalizing everything, not only on environmental matters on sustainability, but definitely as well on sustainability, it can help for sure. And I talk a lot about farming because for us as a food company, of course, a lot comes from the soil, right? The seeds and all, and technology there has progressed a lot and has given us an enormous point of difference, and even to sustain the challenge that we were putting before on pricing, etc. You know, like how you can become much more efficient and consequently fund the additional costs that come in other places. So yes, technology plays a very critical role.
Yeah, and the core need is really transparency, which is obviously an increasing need. So whether it is technology that is on a box of Tampax to allow people to understand where the organic cotton is coming from and how it's made into the product, whether it is, I mentioned the Holy Grail technology that uses digital watermark embedded on the surface of the packaging so that when it's scanned, recyclers can actually have a very clean stream of plastic to get better value as output, or whether it is to give consumer feedback. You know, we have a program that is called 50 Liter Home. It's to enable people to live well with only 50 liters per person per day compared to 150 or 250 today, depending on the region, and to be able to give them feedback on how much water and energy they use in their home. And I mean, you need technology for that, you know. And so throughout the value chain, technology is an accelerator and a formidable enabler.
So it's interesting. I'm hearing two different perspectives on this, but they're both equally interesting. The first one is the role of digital in helping create that sustainable, the scalable solution, sort of the operational, and then also the leveraging of technology to help you, communicate to the consumer and sort of help bring the consumer into the mix and educate the consumer in desiring more of these products and following these sustainable these processes. On a related note, I have a question from Kristen Vula from the US. She's asking a question related to authenticity and the authenticity of your sustainable mission. What are a couple of best practices for communicating sustainability efforts in a way that resonates and is perceived, I think this is the key term, as authentic with your consumers?
I mean, I would say, I mean, I mentioned that because to me it's a critical one. It needs to fit with what the brand stands for. You know, if it's borrowed interest, if it's, you know, saying it because it looks good, it doesn't work. So when we have Ariel and Tide saying that they will reinvent clean to decarbonize laundry at every step, they can say that because first they have an history of providing, you know, superior cleaning performance, which is an enabler to cold water wash. And it fits very well with what they've been doing. So authenticity is also what you do versus what you say. And I think we need to start doing it before we say it. And it's very important that we base whatever we say on science. And the other thing is, because sustainability is such a dimensional topic, it's like make sure that if you do advance on one of the dimensions, you don't go backward on another one. I think that's Rafa mentioned, the replacing plastic with cardboard. Not always, you know, I mean, from a total holistic standpoint, it may not be better for the environment. So I think it's again, you know, starting with science, but also starting with what's the brand stands for.
Look, this is a great question because it is definitely on the top of the debate also. Like, and you see every once in a while companies, brands getting completely wrong, right? Trying to step into spaces that they don't have the right to claim, right? We try to use a concept that I learned here a few years ago, which is very interesting, kind of swords and shields, right? So I mean the shields are the areas that we need to protect because they are common area that you just need to do it because it's a protection area. So call it child labor. Like you don't want to have child labor. Period. You're not going to claim this into any brand, but you're not going to have you have to protect yourself, make sure all your suppliers and all are doing it. You're not polluting the environment. It's a shield, right? It's just you need to have this to sustain your company. But then there are areas where swords, like how do you transform this into a positive of the brand, right? How do you actually, in a way, speak loud from the brand point of view with a cause that is close to the brand. So in our case, for example, Heinz is a brand that is close to 90% plant-based, right? It's not 100, but close to 90%. So the reason we don't claim completely yet, because we say, okay, but we have our it's not 100%. We cannot go. But if you think tomatoes, beans, most of our ingredients, what we do is soil based, is seeds, is what we call the seed to the bottle or soil to the table. But connecting this to the brand is extremely important. Otherwise, like and as I said, some companies do take you wrong. So it's a very critical question, that it's a very important debate that happens all the time with sustainability and marketing teams. You know, how you connect the brand to the right sustainability goal.
Well, folks, this has been great. We have time for one last quick question. We're almost at the hour here, so it's a little bit unfair. I'm going to ask this question and then tell you we have very limited time to answer, and this is a big one. Lydia Sue is asking us about your experiences in growing sustainable initiatives in developing countries, and trying to understand how you balance that effort to go friendly, especially in a developing nation where there are other factors to consider.
Yeah, so you need obviously to, although the needs are very much universal, you know, when you ask what matters most to people, it's basically the top three are the same, you know, in developed and developing regions. That's climate, that's, you know, air pollution, that's waste. But there are things that are more immediate and more visible in developing geographies, and waste is a very important one. So there, you know, we have been focusing a lot of efforts in eliminating plastic waste, so that preventing waste from getting into the ocean, which is ultimately where they go, through efforts like the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and P&G is chairing the alliance. And so you need to go for, you know, what matters most for those regions. But we've seen, and we've been also surprised by that actually it's climate change is more visible and seen as a more important issue, and driving responsible consumption is more important actually in those countries, because they see directly the effect in their daily life, and they're asking for help from brands. So it is, you know, we've been, and it has been more recent, but now it's accelerating, like China is catching up with all the other regions on this. And so we are basically developing the same approach of sustainable innovation, you know, across the regions.
Yeah, I would say in the end, JP, is connecting to the consumers. Those are global issues that it needs to be tackled globally, but then you tailor a bit in terms of priority depending on the region, because like in Latin America, there's a lot of discussion on plastic use and waste. In Europe, the ingredients and the origin of the ingredients plays a very important role for us. In Asia Pacific, carbon emissions is on top of the agenda. So it varies a bit, but in the end, all the issues are common and global. It's just the weight that they get, or the priority, let's say, it might vary depending on what the consumers and the situation of the countries. But the issues are the same.
That's wonderful. I want to thank both of you. Your final remarks really clarify for us that the sustainability initiative is a global and not just a regional or localized one, which means to the extent that you're also trying to manage other corporate social responsibility goals, that they should be aligned, and that going to, whether it's a developing nation or one of your largest economies, that this doesn't really change the relative role, although maybe some of the weight shift a little bit in the process. Folks, we're at the end of our time here. We went a minute over, but I want to thank both of you so much for especially for your how frankly you were willing to tackle these problems. And, you know, as Virginie, as you said it, the true answer versus the politically correct one. I'm really grateful that you're willing to share some of your personal insights into this. Thank you both, to you and to Rafa. To our audience members, thank you so much for your questions and your comments. I think it really shaped the conversation nicely. Before you sign off, I just want to remind you that there will be an exit survey. It will pop up as soon as you close your browser. We kindly ask that each of you, if you have a moment, to fill in that survey. And then finally, I just want to remind everyone who participated that an email will be sent at some point afterwards indicating how you can access a copy of the recording of this session. So with that, I want to thank you to our panelists. I want to thank you all of our audience members for what I think was an incredibly productive discussion session. Thank you all, and then good luck the rest of your day today.